Welcome to the App in Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast.
For so many mobile app developers, it's an all or nothing battle out there in the App Store.
This App in Top podcast is your mobile app marketing advantage.
Let's get that new app of yours moving to the top.
This is the App in Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast.
And now your host, Michael Bauer.
Welcome. This is the App in Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast produced by appintop.com. You can find our daily blog at blog.appintop.com. Also, make sure you track us down at Facebook, facebook.com/appintop. And of course, we tweet. We expect you to do the same thing. Hit us up on Twitter at appintop_com. appintop_com. Peak Games is a Turkish social gaming company that is growing, some sources say, faster than EA and Wooga. So we invited Erdem Anan, the Director of Business Intelligence and Marketing at Peak Games, to talk about promoting and advertising mobile games in the Middle East and Turkey. First of all, Erdem, let me say this. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. It's my pleasure.
And secondly, what a great title you have. I love that title, Director of Business Intelligence and Marketing. It almost makes you sound like a spy to a certain extent. I think that's so cool.
It sounds cool, right?
Yeah, you're like the 007 of marketing in video games. I think that's fantastic. Let's talk about just getting an understanding of gamers in MENA. The Turkey and MENA region has a vast territory covering over, 400 million people. How many people in your region have smartphones? And do you have an idea of the breakdown between iOS and Android platforms?
Yeah, as many people know, it's a fast-growing region, and it's an emerging market. Although, like in any other country, the high-income people usually have their iPhones and iPads. Like the iOS distribution among a little bit higher-income group is larger than Android users, but the majority of the users have here Android, so it's an Android-dominating market.
Okay. Now, with that, you guys Peak Games leads in the social and mobile gaming segment. So how different is MENA in terms of mobile game consumption from, say, the rest of Europe or U.S. markets?
I think it's like the gamers in Middle East and in Turkey are pretty much same when you compare it to the Western market, although there is this difference of competition and socializing through games. So when you look at our app stores, the top grossing apps, you don't see a lot of single-player apps. You don't see a lot of isolated games that you can play on your own, but rather you see more competitive games like strategy games, mid-core games, like social casino games that you play multiplayer with your friends and so on.
So it becomes the gaming aspect is certainly more social there than you would find in other places. I mean, sure, you're going to find those same things at the top of the app stores in other markets, but it seems like those rule over something that you would play individually.
Absolutely. So what we see in Turkey and Middle East is casual games that are more like single-player games are underperforming, while the competitive games usually overperform. The numbers that we see, let's say for Turkey, for competitive games, for coffee house games that you play with your friends, they have so high revenue numbers when you compare it to the same games in Italy, in France, even some European markets.
Interesting. I think that's a very interesting thing to think about here. With that said, do you have a gender and age breakdown? What is sort of the key demographic for the more populated users?
Yeah, I think our region, we're lucky to have probably the youngest population when compared to the other regions of the world. So we have a very young population, and I think that triggers the competitive behavior as well, in some sense. But usually the gamers, the gender distribution is pretty much like in any other country. Though, I should say, the pairs, when it comes to payment, monetization, it usually kind of bends towards men. Spend a lot more than women. And that's why you see Clash of Clans, that's why you see, Game of War, competitive strategy games and competitive social casino games performing a lot better than our male-dominated games, performing a lot better than female-dominated games.
Recently, your CEO, Rina Onur, talked about how card and board games are very popular in your region. So you're seeing that kind of a concept as well, because I feel like those are a little bit more social than, say, solitaire, for instance. So that translates to the mobile games and what's most successful for Peak Games. You see that clearly.
Yeah, for peak, absolutely. That has a meaning in mobile games as well. Our most successful games are traditional coffee house games that we have in Turkey. These games people already play. When you go out, when you go into different coffee houses like cafes, you will see four people coming together, sitting around a table, start playing this okay, as we call some sort of rummy cup, and some tile-based games, some card games. And that's performing well for us as well, because these games are already being played by a lot of people in Turkey. So this is one of the most popular game for us, having more than 500,000 DAU on its own, and people play it every day, and that's what you see in the top grossing apps in the App Store as well.
Now, you mentioned earlier in Clash of the Clans, and I'm curious, what are the Western games, such as Candy Crush Saga, Clash of the Clans, Kim Kardashian Hollywood, Angry Birds, do they do well there as well?
Absolutely. Like the successful games are successful in Turkey as well. Though I would say Clash of Clans, for example, is more successful in Turkey that when you compare it to similar economies with similar, I don't know, like demographics.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Kim Kardashian, for example, is not a very popular celebrity in Middle East and in Turkey. That's why you will see it a little bit below in the App Store.
Sure.
But Clash of Clans, I know Game of War, Candy Crush Saga, as anywhere else, is also successful in Turkey. We don't have a different culture in terms of gaming and visual expectation from a game, but we have different preferences when playing a game and paying for a game.
Okay, so let's talk. We'll get into monetization coming up here in just a little bit. Do you notice, just in regards to users and gamers there, do you notice anything like specifically what type of the day people typically are playing their games? It's seemingly with the social aspect that you're talking about, and some of the games that are sort of the traditional coffee house games. Are you seeing any specific time of the day, or do they run the gamut for 24/7?
It usually runs 24/7, like in any other countries. Though we have this, in the region, we have some specific kind of religious month, as you might know, Ramadan.
Mm-hmm.
And in Ramadan, people do play until late night, so until the whole day for fasting starts.
Yes.
People do play the games, and you can see really high concurrent user numbers around 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m.
Right.
when it comes to this religious time of the year.
That normally on other occasions there might be a minimal amount, but not to the level
Absolutely.
you see at that religious time of year.
Absolutely.
Do you find that trivia type games, which I understand are popular Turkish trivia games as well, do you find that is a popularity or is expected to be popular based on knowledge of the local culture?
Yeah. The people in Turkey and in MENA in general are not very good in English. So not a lot of people can actually speak very good English. So it comes to localization in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you have the real language, if you have an actual Turkish or Arabic game, then people might play it. And then quiz games, I'm coming to the same point again and again, but you can see a lot of really good quiz games performing well because you beat your friends,
mm-hmm.
because you just pass them and you're faced with some questions that really match your culture. People want to see it in our region. People want to see the actual cultural fit when they play a game.
So, especially in the cases of trivia games, and I think this applies to games in general, anywhere, localization is huge. What kind of localization should be done if you're getting ready to launch a game in MENA?
Well, in terms of language, I would say Arabic and Turkish are a must if you want to master the region. But what we call, usually at peak, is culturalization. It's a bit more than just changing the language. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you're building up a farm game, you don't put a church, but you put a mosque instead.
Yes.
Or if you just put a grape juice instead of a wine, or sheep instead of a pig, because people don't breed pig in their houses in the Middle East, but breed sheep. And people don't make wine mostly, but they would prefer, I don't know, like apple juice, grape juice, and so on. So that's how you find the right audience for your games, because then people actually play a game that actually reflects their daily lives.
I like the term culturalization, because I think localization, like you said, it leads one to believe that just simply changing a language or a dialect of some kind is going to make a difference. And I think that what you're talking about goes way deeper than that and makes it more applicable, especially in a very social atmosphere like you have in Turkey.
Yeah, absolutely. And it applies to all the countries in the region as well. So, like, people actually have their national holidays, and people are quite actually sensitive to these kind of activities. In our game, War of Mercenaries, a strategy game, we just put a specific flag for their national holiday and gave them a gift because it's something that they're proud of, celebrating and so on. And during this religious fast, we put a sheep because it's kind of common to sacrifice sheep during this religious fast. So people really respond to that because they love seeing the offline things that they already do in their favorite games.
Now, we've talked about this a little bit here. Obviously, your culturalization word, which I really appreciate that. Do gamers' characteristics in Turkey and Arabic-speaking countries differ more than just the language? I mean, you're talking about different holidays and applying, gifts as sort of a thank you, if you will, to players and users of this. Is there anything else that you would say needs to be considered when you're talking about those culturalizations and the characteristics of the Turkey and MENA countries?
Yeah, when we were doing acquisition for Turkey and Middle Eastern countries, we saw that people actually respond very differently to acquisition, like to marketing images. So when we put a guy with a mustache, a guy with a sword, like a sharpened sword, that really looks like a Middle Eastern character, in historical Middle Eastern character, they respond quite well. But instead, if we put a Viking or a longbowman, which you would never ever see probably in the history of Middle East about the local guys, then they don't respond. So visuals, you have to be sure that the visuals that you're showing to your users are actually the visuals that they tend to see in their daily lives. They respond well to all the cultural stuff, to all the cultural events, to even the football matches. Like if there's a big derby match in Turkey between Fenerbahce and Galatasaray, so you definitely have to include it in your fan page because that is the focus of the day for all the users in Turkey.
Yeah, that's where everybody's attention is, so you don't want to ignore that.
Absolutely. So if you put instead a very irrelevant, hey, let's come to my game and get this bonus chip, people wouldn't respond to that well. But if you say, yeah, today is the derby match day, everyone probably is watching this derby match, but in between the derby match, here you Galatasaray fans, take your Galatasaray room in the game, go in there, play with your co-supporters, and beat this Fenerbahce guys in the other room.
All right, here's what we're going to do, Erdem. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to start talking about the monetization aspect and how easy, how difficult it is to monetize in MENA, how they pay, all of that with the Director of Business Intelligence and Marketing at Peak Games, Erdem Anan, in seconds here on the App and Top podcast.
This podcast is produced with support from App and Top, an automated mobile app marketing platform in App Store and Google Play.
This is the App and Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast. I'm Mike Bauer. Originally a social gaming company, Peak Games now derives over 50% of its revenue from mobile games. Over 11 million people play its games every day, and the company claims leading positions in Turkey, the Middle East, North Africa. Erdem Anan, the Director of Business Intelligence and Marketing at Peak Games, is here to talk about promoting and advertising mobile games in the Middle East and Turkey. All right, so Erdem, let's get to monetization here. Considering that the average income is much lower in MENA, what percentage of users are becoming paying users?
Yeah, I think it's, as you say, it's lower. When we look at our numbers in Middle East, it's lower in percentage, but people are missing this most of the time when looking at the Middle Eastern market. The income distribution in Middle Eastern market is very non-uniform. So you have a very great chance to get a super whale in Qatar, in UAE, in Saudi Arabia, that would change all the equations of your LTV, CPI, and etc. So that's how we look at MENA. We know that the paying user percentage is low. We know that the ARP, DAU might be lower than other countries, but we also know that there's a great chance that you that you find a whale and that will pay thousands of dollars to your game. And that's how the business for us in free-to-play Middle East makes sense.
Gotcha. What are the top 3 in-app purchases in your game?
They're pretty much the same in all other games in the same genre. For our social casino games, they're chips, simply large chips mostly, the large bunks of chips. For our strategy games, it's usually a booster or some sort of sword, some sort of battle gear that will help you to defeat your enemy. And in casual games, it's like any other way, like a booster, additional lives, and so on. There are not so many peculiarities in this one.
That said, do you find that advertising is a significant share of your revenue, and how does that work for you?
Not so much, huh? When I look at our revenues, the advertising share is quite low. Like, I think it might be same with the other gaming companies as well.
Okay.
But advertising in MENA and in Turkey is not the core focus of many international advertising agencies, publishing partners. So they don't really focus on Turkey. So the eCPMs are quite low when compared to the other countries. In-app purchase, on the other hand, is pretty much the main source of revenue for us.
Gotcha. We're talking about the monetization here, Erdem. I'm curious. It's easier when a player has a credit card, obviously, which in Turkey is about 70%. So what is a typical payment method in Turkey and MENA countries?
The typical payment methods, people prefer paying in carrier billing, direct carrier billing. So in Turkey specifically, a lot of players just want to pay with with direct carrier billing. And Facebook already has this, but the other mobile platforms have not yet integrated other alternative payment methods yet in our region. In some of the MENA regions, like in UAE, for example, there is also direct carrier billing in the mobile platforms as well. But credit card penetration, as you say, in Turkey is quite high. So we can really find users that are using their credit cards, that use mobile payment methods and alternative payment methods. So I should say the gift cards don't really work.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
Yeah, they don't. People really don't prefer buying a gift card for their friends or for themselves. Rather, they just send an SMS or work with their telecom operator to just have this direct carrier billing and so on.
Yeah, I always feel that it's a nice idea, the gift card concept. It's a great idea, but I think the actual amount of time it takes to enter all of that kind of stuff, it's just too time consuming. Just bill me and I'll be fine with it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's happening in Turkey.
So is virtual currency gambling legal in the area? And if so, do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, it's like social casino. We call it social casino.
Social casino,
because there's really no payouts in those games, and it's perfectly fine. Like, people don't have this tendency in Gulf countries, for in Saudi Arabia, it might be harder to find the social casino players, but in Turkey, it's quite common, and people do play it normally. And I think there's no legal problems with playing that. No
legal issues at all.
Yeah. No.
Are you seeing any or many impulse purchases?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think emerging markets, like in any other emerging market, people really look for the opportunities where they can get the same thing for a lower price. And like during these, super sale times, we'll see doubling, tripling revenues very easily because people were expecting that and people were just waiting to buy those things for a cheaper price.
Gotcha. Now, Rovio's merchandise accounts for around 50% of the company revenue. Do you monetize your games offline with actual physical board and card games? Is there a carryover or a crossover, if you will?
No. For our case, we work the other way around. So most of our games are actually offline games. So we get our games' popularity from their offline popularity.
Gotcha.
So people do play Rummy Cup, offline so much that when you open the mobile app, when you launch the Facebook application, people just fill in themselves and call their friends, call their families to play the games on our own. So this is the cool part about doing something that is already available, that's already visible offline.
And the popularity of it, and with that, it's easier to give that to your audience that's demanding it and have a way to take it with them.
Absolutely, there's already a great market for that. So if you don't do it, someone else would definitely do it. And the cool thing about these kind of games is that they're CCU-based games. Like, so you need a lot of people at the same time to make sure that your players are finding each other easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that gives you a very critical mass advantage. If you're a first mover, if you have the greatest audience, then you have a great chance to preserve your ranking in the market. And when people want to play those coffee house games, they come to the biggest ones because they know that their friends are going to be there and they can find millions of people in a month to play with.
He is Erdem Anan, the Director of Business Intelligence and Marketing at Peak Games. I know that at least here in the States and in some other countries, I've seen games like, using it as an example, Clash of the Clans, or in the case of Angry Birds, that companies are starting to make larger casino-type versions of those games to install into the casinos out here in the United States and have people play those games because they're so popular on mobile. Do you guys even have, do you dare mess with the history? And what I mean with that is, you guys have such a great history of these coffee house games. Do you dare try to play around with those and add new things, make things different, reinvent the wheel to try to create a brand new game, or is it best to just stick with what is popular there?
Well, it's a tough question. So we already have the original version of the game.
Mm-hmm.
It is somehow difficult and dangerous to play with the really.
I imagine it's gotta be tough to, like. At what point do you say, well, we can't change that much?
Yeah, like it really comes to the rules of the game. So you really can't change the rules of the game because that's how people used to it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can change with the way that people interact with the game. So you can put a lot of gifts in the game that represents their, like, this is a social game, right? So
sure.
People want to socialize with each other. So if you create additional opportunities for them to socialize, like sending your partner a gift, or sending the girl on the table a little bit flirty thing.
Sure.
This changes the experience a lot, right? That now you're not only playing with your coffee house partners, but you also have a little bit of chance to meet with someone,
sure.
to talk with someone, and maybe, I don't know, to have a relationship, like a friend relationship or something, outside the game as well. And this is how it happens in Turkey. We have a lot of fun groups. Normally, they wouldn't even meet with each other. They're talking with each other, they're discussing the game, and then they do sometimes have a hangout outside and stuff like that. That's how you change the actual experience, how people consume your product in the end.
Yeah, so you're not changing the experience of the game so much as you're changing the social experience of the game. The game remains the same, but the social aspect is what you're developing.
Absolutely. And the algorithm that we match people, this is quite important because you want a challenging game in the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your main idea is to compete with people,
sure.
You need to find the right person to put in the same table, because otherwise then you will have a very easy player that you wouldn't really like offline as well,
right?
And beat him all the time, and,
right.
and that's how you don't enjoy a lot. But what we do at Peak Games is trying to find the actually right person to compete with at that table and bring him as fast as possible so that everyone has enough fun and enough challenge.
And do you find that pays off? That's paying off for the users at this point? They feel challenged in those tables that they sit down at?
Absolutely. So that's how, like, we know that from our data that if a user, wins a lot, then he starts churning. Like he really doesn't like coming back. He really doesn't feel like coming back because he's not challenged at all. And on the other hand, if you if the player always loses the game, then it's bad as well because he thinks he's not good enough for the game, he can't play the game and so on. But there's always enough players for us. That's the advantage of being maybe big in the market. Enough players for us to match, equally people.
Erdem, when we come back, we are going to discuss here distribution, the marketing, the retention, all in Mena with the Director of Business Intelligence and Marketing at Peak Games, Erdem Anan, in moments on the App and Top podcast.
This podcast is produced with support from App and Top, an automated mobile app marketing platform in App Store and Google Play.
This indeed is the App and Top mobile app marketing podcast. I'm Michael Bauer, your host. We would love to hear from you, so please send us your comments via Facebook at facebook.com/appintop. Or if you'd rather, feel free to do it on Twitter at appintop_com. Appintop_com. Peak Games, a Turkish social gaming company that is growing, some sources say, faster than EA and Wooga. The Director of Business Intelligence and Marketing at Peak Games, Erdem Anan, joining us to talk about promoting and advertising mobile games in the Middle East and Turkey. So, Erdem, in regards to distribution and marketing, what role, as we've heard so far, a lot of people, if they are monetizing, they're doing it through the actual company. What role do telecom operators play here in regards to distribution, payments, and advertising?
I think their biggest role would be payments. So people do tend to pay through their telecom operators a lot in our region. They do some advertising as well. So they let you they have a huge inventory. So they have their ad units, like their SMS, like their push, like their placed apps on the devices. But their primary I think objective and primary role in our region is payments. Distribution, I would say it's not a lot. It's starting very simply. And advertising, I think it has a lot to do when compared to the other European markets.
Interesting. So, thinking about the distribution aspect of this, speaking of TechCrunch, Disrupt last year, Rina Anar emphasized the importance of community, and it sounds like that's a big thing when it comes to the MENA area. And keeping the users returning to play the game. Can you share with us what some of those retention stats are for like board games, OK or OK+?
So last year, Rina, I think, mentioned the 40-20-10 retention rates.
Okay.
Introducing mobile, I think that the numbers currently we see are higher than this. But for Facebook, it's a little bit lower than that at the moment. I would say long-term retention rates of the games that you mentioned, OK+ and OK, are super stable and super high. So we see the 30 retentions above 15%, like 14%, 15%, and they stay like that, like super stable for such a long time. So we see retention numbers of first year pretty much the same with the second year. So that's how the business makes sense, because people play it for such a long time with their friends, with their families, that once you grab them, you keep them forever.
It's interesting, too. It makes me, when you say this, and it's just something that stands out to me, because I don't know that I've aside from my wife and playing a little bit of Words with Friends kind of an aspect, I don't know that I've played any online mobile games with anybody in my family. And it makes me think that might be a big portion of your audience. Do you see that in order to sort of keep those retention rates high, that there's a lot of family playing?
There's a lot of family playing. There's a lot of friends playing, I think. Because we see in many of our games, from looking at our data, the average number of people, like the average number of friends for our players, are quite high when compared to the other countries. That's how people are connected through games in Turkey.
Yeah, I like that aspect of it. Let's talk about the advertising aspect, because I think I'm curious how, aside from the social aspect of this and people word of mouth, friends inviting other friends to come play, let's talk about the mobile advertising. I mean, Twitter has been banned by the Turkish government for a while. Do you do a lot of user acquisition through Facebook ads?
Yes, Facebook is still quite popular. Though I should say Twitter is now perfectly fine in Turkey.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah. Facebook is still the most popular social network in Turkey. Twitter is quite famous. I think you know the numbers better than me in this one, but we're in top 10 for Facebook, in top 10 for Twitter, and in top 10 again for the most time spent online when you look at the Turkey numbers. So we're quite an internet country, I should say, like social network country. We use a lot of them. And we do, of course, do a lot of advertising through Facebook.
You do, okay.
That's one of our major and most popular advertising sources.
What are some other high-performing marketing channels that you deploy?
In Turkey, people do love watching video ads for there's this incentivization. You give some virtual currency to people that watch video ads. People do that a lot in Turkey. So the video ad networks perform really well. And apart from that, there are local partners. Since it's not a very developed market in terms of mobile advertising, we have quite a lot of local partners that has exclusive inventory, and we usually work with them. Apart from that, really like Facebook would be the biggest one. Google, like AdWords, AdMob would be the second biggest one, I believe, as far as what we use, and the video networks.
Within the existing gaming community helping your marketing, do you find that, I know that a call for help from friends is sometimes pointed out as an effective mechanism to get users into a game. Do you find that works, something like that works well for you guys in regards to these games? Maybe not a call for help, but a call for play or the socialization that you guys have with the games there. Do you find something like that works well in regards to marketing efforts?
Yeah. Once I look at the numbers from one of our competitive games, we had this call for help, Open Graph action for Facebook, and we also have this challenge your friend Open Graph action for Facebook. So when you look at the numbers, the challenge Open Graph is almost 5 times more clickable and more convertible than the other one. So that's how people like to challenge each other, as I mentioned.
Sure.
And people play the games that their friends are playing because it is already filtered through a social network that that this game is good if that guy is playing that.
Right.
The social interaction through Facebook is quite popular.
What percentage of new users comes through viral or social channels when we're trying to acquire new users?
When it compares to the actual total number of users, I would say 40-50% of our users are coming through viral channels.
Oh, wow.
It's really when compared to other developed markets like Germany, like France, it's 2-3 times more. When you do a regular amount of paid acquisition, you have a lot of viral users coming in because people tend to spread the word.
Wow. So what is, with that said, what is your experience cross-promoting new games to existing players?
I think we're one of the lucky companies in here because we have already 25 million players playing every month. And we have the luxury and the opportunity to have different genres of games. So we have social casino apps, we have strategy apps, we have casual apps. So they all have different audiences. And we know that our social casino apps, once we have one user playing one of those apps, he really tends to play the other ones. So cross-promotion is super helpful in there. So we don't have this problem of creating an audience when we start from scratch for a new game, because once we put a banner, a cross-promotion interstitial in one of our existing games, it starts to fill in, and we have already this critical mass that starts playing with each other. So I think, as I mentioned, we're one of the lucky companies in here.
Yeah, it sounds to me like when you've got that built-in audience and you've got that built-in group of people that on a social level, they may just be looking for a new way to relate to their friends, and that game being the new way, it sounds to me like you'll have a fairly good level of success in cross-promoting with something new.
Yeah, like most of our user base is playing at least 2 of our games, I should say.
Wow, that's great. What are the best advertising and affiliate networks to get active paying users in Turkey and MENA? Can you share with us anybody that in particular stands out to you?
Well, when I look at the local partners, I think Digitouch would be one of them. And we also have international providers that are really helping us in here, like Video Ad Networks, as I mentioned, like the big guys. AdColony, OneGoal, Amplifier, and apart from that, we're working with many Israeli companies because their core focus is this region. They gather a lot of exclusive inventory, and their traffic is usually very high quality.
Can you share with us an average CPI in Turkey for iOS and Android?
Yeah, like for Android, it's around $1 or so. For iOS, it's a bit higher, as expected.
Yeah.
It's 1.5, sometimes 1.75 if you scale up. But yeah, like the eCPI rates, when you include the virality, when you include the other factors, they tend to decrease a lot.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap things up here, Herden, with a question that I want you to sort of look into the future, if you will, for me, and tell me what you want to see happen in the next year for your end of business there at Peak Games, and one thing that you would hope for the entire sort of region on a mobile level that will happen in the future. So just a couple of things there. One thing immediately for Peak Games and another thing for the region that you'd like to see happen.
Okay, so far we've already developed a lot of games for Turkish audience. We have some Middle Eastern audience, but in the future we will find the actual board games, the coffee house games that we find in Turkey very culturally relevant in other countries in the region. So we saw that there are many super fit in terms of cultural, super fit games that people do play offline. Now we're searching for them, and we're going to come with a lot of more hits for the countries that we're working now.
That's fantastic. That is great news. Listen, Erdem, for the past 30-plus minutes, you've explained the unknown world of gamers and MENA and how users become paying users, what kind of role social media plays in user acquisition, and more importantly, you've educated us on how social that whole region is, and mainly the success therein, with not necessarily trying to tweak the game or tweak the rules of the game, but more importantly, the social aspect of it. Erdem, thank you so much for taking your time today. You are now officially 100% free to go. Thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure, Michael.
And thank you to all of you. Thank you very much for listening. This has been the App and Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast. Be sure to visit our daily blog, blog.appandtop.com, where you can find all this great information and much, much more every single day. So until next time, I'm Mike Bauer. See ya.
The App and Top Mobile App Marketing Podcast is produced by
appintop.com.